Welcome back to the Rebel Health Collective podcast. This is part 2 of our interview with the Mini Me Dietitian, Kathy O'Brien. I'm your host, Josh Bostic, and today we're diving even deeper into the wild world of toddler nutrition. If you've ever faced the challenges of picky eating, navigating mealtime chaos, or wondered how to balance sugar and snacks for your little one, you're exactly where you need to be. Kathy is here to share her tried and true strategies, from creating a positive mealtime environment to gently setting boundaries that encourage healthy eating habits without turning food into a battleground. So get ready for another round of practical tips, heartfelt insights, and a rapid-fire Q&A that covers everything from quick breakfast ideas to the secrets behind balanced snacks. Let's jump in. And then I know this next one is probably one of the big reasons a lot of people will tune into this, and that is strategies for working with picky eaters. Any just tried and true, 100%, you're never going to have another worry tips?
There are so many layers to this. And honestly, that is why I built my coaching program, because I work with families for 12 weeks and we get into all the different layers because there are so many tips and tricks out there and things that I could give you too, right? Which I will touch on a couple, but really there are so many different layers to why your child may be picky. And for some families, I even want to define what is picky, because I truly believe that little ones are labeled as picky way sooner than they ever should be. And once we put that label on them, we kind of put them in a box, and we end up being the ones to limit them. I don't mean that in a harsh way, but it's true. If we have limiting beliefs of what our little one is doing or can do, then we end up being the ones to limit them. So sometimes it is family environment. Sometimes it is mealtime habits. Sometimes it's just the fact that we're afraid that they're not going to eat something, so it's not showing up on their plate, right? Your little one can't learn to like the foods that they don't keep seeing. So even if the fruits or the vegetables are in your house, but they're not showing up on your child's plate, they cannot learn to like them. So that's a really big part of why, too, if you follow my Instagram, you're going to see that my plates look like my son's plate, because he needs to see, too, that I am eating those foods also, but they're also showing up on his plate. So there are, again, so many things that you can do there. The biggest thing that I think is honestly the easiest thing to do that is very overlooked in our culture today is sitting down and eating meals together regularly, on repeat. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to do it every single day. I know you are busy. We are all busy. You have to make space for the things that are really important to you. And if improving your child's eating habits is one of those, then you can start by sitting down and eating with your child without the TV on, without your phone in your hand, but sitting there and eating with them. And something that I see very frequently with babies and toddlers is parents sitting down with them while they're eating because you want to watch them and make sure that they're not choking or something like that. Toddlers, after the age of 1, we start calling them toddlers, and it's like, okay, yeah, you're a toddler, but I don't really fully trust you eating yet because you're like still kind of a baby. Not just sitting there in front of them expecting them to eat, but sitting there and eating with them, modeling for them, giving them an example to follow, because they can also see right through you. If you're sitting there and picking things up off their plate, yum, 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 this is so good. You want to eat it? Like, no, get out of my face. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm doing here. Put yourself in your child's shoes for a second too, because I mean, the amount of times that I think about if somebody was up in my face saying, are you going to eat it? Do you like it? Oh, that chicken's yummy. You should eat some. I wouldn't want to do anything either. So again, I know I sound like a broken record a little bit, but again, a lot of times it comes back to what are we doing at the table that is helping our child to want to take an interest in the foods that we're serving, or that is potentially hindering their interest in different foods. Now, I also don't say that to write off that picky eating can also be multifaceted. For some little ones, it can be a sensory issue. For some little ones, it can be a oral motor skill issue. And in those cases, something like feeding therapy can be very helpful. But I do see quite frequently that it's not actually a skill issue or anything that is quote unquote wrong, but it's really all of the roots to your little one's building relationship with food.
Almost more of like an environment type issue in a sense.
Yeah, so I kind of think of picky eating as a symptom, not as a problem. Picky eating is a symptom of whatever the other problems are. So we have to expose what the other problems are. And
And
that's
it,
also not to say that toddlers don't go through phases or seasons, because they totally do. And honestly, there is physiological explanation to what happens when their eating habits change as toddlers also. Like their growth rates change, their appetites change. There's a lot of stuff that is happening in their body that can also be attributing to their change in eating behaviors or eating habit. So being able to really look at the full picture is how I see my clients specifically be able to actually break out of cycles and get out of picky eating rut.
Interesting. And so that could be reinforcement strategies where if they're not eating dinner, but you're giving them gummy bears or something afterwards, and obviously they're not going to eat the food that you put in front of them. They're going to go for the added sugar snack. Or like you mentioned, if the TV is going and they're distracted, or when you were describing being in your child's face saying, eat this, I don't know why, but me sitting at my cubicle at work and like my manager just sitting in the cube with me, kind of
Mm,
looking over me. That's for some reason the thought that came into my mind, where if you're sitting there eating with your child, that's a different environment than just like staring at them like, are you going to eat that or not? So
totally.
then they can pick up on that. I mean, they're very emotionally intelligent.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Very cool. And then another big common question is managing sugar intake.
Hmm.
It's everywhere. It's added everywhere. And so, how much is too much? Is there times and places where, for us, we try to control like 90% of it? When we're at the house or we're going out to eat, and when it's up to us, we try to do the best that we can. But he's going to go to birthday parties. Our son goes to daycare. We don't have
Hmm.
a full control over all of that stuff. What are your thoughts on just trying to make sure that they have a normal life, but at the same time, not just turning a blind eye to it?
Yeah. So in terms of guidelines, really for added sugar, and I stand by this honestly, and I'll tell you why for a couple of reasons, is best practice is to avoid added sugar in the first 2 years of life. And there's two reasons for that. One, because little ones are quite literally forming their food preferences for in the first 2 years of life. And so babies or toddlers who are exposed to super sweet tasting foods repeatedly in those early formative years are more likely to have a preference for sweeter tasting foods later in life, which we know can lead to poor health outcomes. So, especially when your little one's a baby or an early toddler, like under 2, it's just really not necessary. When you are in situations where it's kind of out of your control, I totally hear that. You don't need to be a crazy person about it. But in terms of what you are buying, bringing into your home, feeding your child, when grandma wants to give baby a bite of ice cream, like all due respect, grandma, but they will have many years to enjoy ice cream and you can make those memories with them too, but it doesn't have to be today. And that's kind of where I stand on the first 2 years, because the second reason is because little ones are growing at a very rapid rate, not only their bodies, but also their brains. And we are setting a foundation for their life. So physically and mentally, neurologically. So the rapid growth requires a lot of very specific nutrients. And as we've already talked about too, their tummies are little and their appetites aren't always super strong. And so when we're dealing with both of those two things, knowing that their nutrient needs are high for good quality nutrition and they don't have very much space to put that nutrition, if we are filling some of that space with essentially nutrients that aren't essential, then those could be displacing intake of the nutrients that they really need. So on one side, it's establishing taste preferences. On the other side, it's truly what does their body need versus what doesn't their body need. After the age of 2, the recommendation is to limit added sugars to less than 10% of total daily calorie intake. Okay. When you're talking calorie intake for a toddler, that's so erratic. I mean, there are equations, there are things that you can, like, I could give you numbers, right? But I don't think that that's very practical or realistic at all. So, based on averages, if we're looking for like a gram amount, the general recommendation is to limit added sugar to less than 25 grams a day after the age of 2. Personally, I think that's a little bit high, especially if we're saying that that could be an everyday occurrence, right? But it's also really easy to exceed. So I think that number is helpful to have in mind, but I definitely err on the side of being as close to zero as possible in our like everyday normal life so that when those birthday parties happen, special events happen, holidays happen on a Saturday when we decide to go get ice cream, I don't worry about it because I know what we are doing kind of 90% of the time, just like you said. Because the other part to that is that, and I mentioned this earlier, but everything that I do is through the lens of building a healthy relationship with food. I personally struggled with an eating disorder in high school and lived in calorie restriction, over exercising. I spent many years healing my relationship with food with my kids as my primary motivator, knowing that if I had a restrictive mindset around food, that that was going to negatively impact my kids one day. So coming from that as well, I also work really hard not to label different foods as good or bad, but simply to teach moderation through my own actions. And so I live in both camps, right? I live in the camp of under 2 years of age. It's really not necessary. Why introduce something that isn't going to benefit them in the long run, right? But then after the age of 2, 100%, we don't need to be the sugar police or make our kids feel bad for taking interest in those foods or feeling like they have to earn them or that they are only a reward. Like I grew up thinking that I could only have dessert if I finished what was on my plate. And that messed with me. So I spent a long time repairing my relationship specifically with sweets. Like I didn't feel in control around them a lot of times. So I just felt like I couldn't have them. I just had to completely cut them out. And that led to a not healthy relationship with those foods, right? So we need to be mindful of what's coming in our homes, of what we're doing most of the time, because we know the negative effects that overconsumption of sugar has on our bodies. We also need to give our kids the opportunity to build a healthy relationship with those foods, even if we as adults are looking at them saying, man, that's not going to make you feel great. We have to let them learn through it, or else they're not going to know how to handle those foods when they get out into the real world.
Yeah, yeah, that's really important. And it's added pressure, but it's good to keep in mind the importance of what you're building. I mean, you're not
Mm-hmm.
just, there's a whole lot more to it than just sugar or not. There's, the nutritional side of it and wanting to be healthy all the time, but also just the mental side of it. I mean, you want them to be able to enjoy life and not be on the straight and narrow all the time and be able to go and have ice cream on a Friday night after a game or something, not freak out or worry about it. And what all toddlers, in my opinion, absolutely love berries. Like
Yeah,
strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, all the berries. It's our number one grocery driver that we spend money on.
totally.
Is there a
I think I
difference?
joked on my Instagram this year. I was like, retailers should put fruit on sale for Black Friday for toddler parents specifically. Like, we don't need all these gadgets. We need the berries on sale.
Seriously, yeah. There should be some sort of like a supplemental income when you have a child for berries. When we're talking about sugar and
Hmm.
kids eating like the natural sugars from those kinds of sources versus the added sugar, what's if we were talking, 20 carbs, just from that value of they're both 20 carbs, what's the difference in those two sugars? I mean, from like a nutritional side and like what it does for us when we're eating those two different sources.
They are going to be utilized the same in the body. So all carbohydrates break down into sugar. So whether you're talking added sugar or natural sugar, it's going to do the same thing in terms of what it breaks down into. Now, you could get really specific and talk glycemic index, and that's going to look different in terms of blood sugar and how all that goes down. But really, my biggest takeaway with that is the difference that I would want people to pay attention to is the fact that a fruit is a naturally occurring sugar, and which means that it's not overly sweet tasting. So going back to really laying those taste preferences early in life, those added sugars come from sugar that is not naturally occurring, meaning that it tastes super sweet. And that also goes for artificial sweeteners. So even if you're buying something that says 0 sugar, but it still has artificial sweeteners in it, it's still going to taste really sweet. And so that is a big difference or important difference for specifically the toddler population, is that difference in taste. We want our kids to have a affinity towards things like fruits, right? Fruits are not bad. They are a good part of a balanced diet. The other thing to think about with something like a fruit is that it also contains vitamins and minerals and fiber. And so there's other benefit to that fruit than to the candy or whatever you're referring to that may just be sugar, right? So that doesn't necessarily mean that one is good versus bad. You can still live in the space of food is neutral without labeling it as that, but recognizing that they do different things for us.
Yeah.
So
And
in that regard, speaking specifically to toddler parents who are like worried about their little one eating so many berries, first of all, you are allowed to set boundaries. Just because your little one wants to eat an entire pint of blueberries doesn't mean you have to let them. Okay. You can also say, and you can do that without making it about the food too. Like, we don't have to say, no, you've had too many blueberries. That's too much sugar. We could say, hey, we're all done with the blueberries for right now because we're going to save some for another day. Right? That's holding the same boundary, but we're not making it about the food itself. It's not your toddler's job to know about sugar or to figure out what sugar should be doing in their body or not, right? That's an unfair thing for us to say to them.
yeah,
So in that regard, if your little one loves fruit, you don't have to fear them loving fruit. It's one more of those sources of carbohydrate that is providing their body with fuel, right? And fruits and vegetables do have similar vitamin mineral profiles. So if your little one is really enjoying berries right now and not so much enjoying broccoli, I'm not saying that they're the same food, and we do eventually want them to eat vegetables also, but they're getting some of those vitamins and minerals that they also need from those fruits.
that's good. That's good to know. I'm glad you added that last little part on there because we are in the broccoli, or gosh, I wish we were in the broccoli phase. We are in the fruit phase and not so much the green thing phase.
Yeah.
So that's good to know. And I was going to add,
Remembering in that too, oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
Remembering in that too that your little one can totally be into fruits, but that doesn't mean that we stop serving the vegetables or the other things that they're not super into right now.
Right. It just helps me go to sleep a little bit better at night knowing that they're not withering away because they didn't eat their broccoli. And I was going to add from like a diabetic standpoint, when I first got diagnosed, they have these things called like glucotabs, and they're straight
Mm-hmm.
sugar. I mean, they're
Yep.
used to correct low blood sugar. You need the sugar, so they're a good thing, and they bring your blood sugar right up. And I would take those when I had a low blood sugar when I was first diagnosed, and my blood sugar would skyrocket, and then
Mm-hmm.
it kind of plummet again. And so I was on this roller coaster where I'd go up and down, up and down. And I started, when I really started reevaluating my foods and trying to eat more whole foods and all of that, I started supplementing with like strawberries or grapes or some raisins and stuff like that. And what I noticed is that the incline wasn't as steep, it was more gradual, and there wasn't a drop off. It kind of went up and it kind of went back down. So that just gets
The
into,
beauty of fiber.
yes, that's the fiber and some of those other nutrients in there where it's not just straight sugar. And I think when you think about that, you can think about our kids getting that sugar rush. They get hyped up and then the insulin hits, all the sugar kind of goes away and they drop. I mean, they plummet, they can get moody and irritable. And that's something that you take into consideration when you're thinking about what foods to be giving them.
Totally. And that's why at every one of those eating opportunities, I'm looking for a form of balance. And when I say balance, I mean pairings of nutrients. So we think of that more often with breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I think, when we're thinking of meals, you think of more of a balanced meal, or at least one or two, like two or three items going together to make up a meal. Same thing applies to snacks though. Rarely, if ever, would suggest giving just a piece of fruit. Not that that's bad. I want to take that back actually. Giving your child just a piece of fruit is totally fine. But thinking that just that piece of fruit is going to hold them over for a long time or is not going to result in moodiness, like you said, in an hour, is unfair. Really pairing nutrients together, I'm always looking to put like a carb with a protein and or a fat. And of course, fiber often comes with one of those forms too, but really serving balanced snacks as well, so that your goal throughout the day is to, on that blood sugar note, and I know we've chatted about this a little bit too, but I spent many years working in endocrinology, so I have a strong background in blood sugar management as well, but really looking to help them stabilize their blood sugars throughout the day. I don't think that's something we really always think about or put words to, but it does affect so much of their day too. And when
Yeah.
you're talking a toddler who already has heightened emotions and is trying to figure this world out, right? To add a blood sugar roller coaster to that is going to make your life even harder. So, yeah, that I think there's not enough credit given to stable blood sugars.
Yeah, it's definitely not talked about much unless you're familiar with like type 1, type 2, and the fluctuations. You don't know about it. And going back to the protein macro that you gave and kind of adding protein to a snack, thinking of how little protein that really needs to be. I'm just trying to think, because we would, say, oh, hey, here's an apple, here's an orange, and not really do cheese or peanuts or anything like that, where you just add, a couple of those, a cheese stick, something like that. That's going to make a huge difference. So that's something that I'll definitely try to incorporate going forward.
Totally. So I think of it as, especially for snacks, even like 3 or 4 grams at a snack to offer is sufficient. Still remembering that it's your job to offer and their job to choose, right? So you could offer a fruit and a cheese stick and they may only choose to eat the fruit, and that's still their choice. But then you have a little bit of explanation in your mind too of, if 30 minutes later they're saying they're hungry, or if an hour later we're having a meltdown, it just gives you more understanding as to what's going on in your child's body too.
Yeah, and that helps. That helps a lot.
Yeah,
when you can
totally.
put a reason to it. So, well, thank you for all of that insight and going into depth on some of those topics.
Yeah.
I do have something new that I haven't done before that I wanted to try with you. And I've got a list of questions and I want to just throw them at you rapid fire. Yes, no, short, couple word answers if you're up for it.
Okay.
All right.
Let's do
You
it.
ready? Okay. First food you recommend for a 6-month-old?
Rich or energy dense. So it's not the number one, it's not the specific food that matters, but what the nutrient sources are. So salmon, beans, eggs, turkey, chicken,
Would not have expected
avocado.
any of those. Okay. Awesome. Best finger food for toddlers.
They
Okay.
should be eating all finger foods. So there's not a best one.
Go to protein source for little ones. And these can be
The
like
one
personal
that
for
they
you.
eat.
Like things that you do in your daily. Like if you were gonna reach out, like make a snack for your kids, what's your go-to
Okay.
quick and easy one?
Probably cheese.
Okay. Most overrated baby food.
Rice cereal.
A food every parent should avoid for their kids that are under 2.
Raw fish.
So no sushi.
Raw fish or high mercury fish. Those should both definitely be avoided.
Okay. Favorite no mess snack.
Oatmeal bars.
Any brand?
I like to make them myself,
Okay.
but also my toddler really likes the Once Upon a Farm one.
Good to know. Good to know. Do you recommend the pouches for on-the-go feeding?
If you need them, totally.
Okay. Any specifics around that? Need to be organic, special brand, anything to look out for in them?
Not necessarily. My biggest thing with pouches is that they shouldn't be making up the majority of your child's diet. So fruit, it's an easy way to get fruits and veggies in, but if you can get one that also, again, packs another nutrient source. So like there are some that also have a source of protein or fat in them that's going to last them a little bit longer than just like an applesauce pouch.
Gotcha. Good. Should babies eat eggs before 1 year old?
Yes.
How much fruit is too much fruit for toddlers?
That's really hard to say, but their general need is about a cup a day. which if you think about that is way easier to meet than you might think.
It is. Yeah. I think we're at like a cup of meal maybe with him.
Yeah.
Quick breakfast ideas for a busy morning.
Overnight oats. Do you want one? Do you want multiple?
No, that one or multiple, whatever comes to mind.
Okay. Overnight oats is like my go-to for quick because you wake up in the morning and it's ready to go. Or any like waffles, pancakes, egg muffins, like anything that I can prep ahead and have in the freezer or the fridge just to grab in the morning is something we do.
Okay. One nutrient that parents often overlook.
Fiber.
We touched on that one earlier. That one's a big one for sure. Should babies have water before the age of 1?
Yes. You can start offering sips of water around 6 months, but no more than 4 ounces before a day. No more than 4 ounces a day before 1.
What is your biggest advice for those parents that are trying to do their best but have a busy schedule?
You are probably doing better than you think because you care to ask that question.
I completely agree with that. I think if we look back and give ourselves some grades, we're doing a lot better than we give ourselves credit for.
It's the people that are asking the questions and are trying that are doing a lot better than you think you are. So give yourself some credit and some grace. And if you want to see change in your little one's eating habits, you probably want to look at your own first. I say that with love, not judgment.
No, and I'm right there with you. So many of the people that I've talked to, and some of them have like specifically talked to mom guilt and, not putting themselves first. And when you unpack it and if you keep putting yourself off and trying to make everything about your kids, they see that, they notice that. And when you start taking care of yourself, they pick up on that and they start, following your actions. So super important. And I think that's one thing that we don't emphasize enough as parents when we're trying to make this perfect environment for our kids is gotta make sure we're taking care of ourselves as well.
Totally. And give yourself some grace along the way. And if you need to, unfollow the accounts that make you feel like you're doing a bad job. Unfollow the accounts that just fear monger. I think there's so much fear mongering around food and feeding your little ones today that if every time you turn around, you're hearing that this is toxic or that's toxic, like you probably need some more wholesome advice going in your eyes or your ears.
Unfollow the fear people and follow the Mini Me Dietitian.
That was not a plot for myself. I genuinely mean, there's so much noise and information or misinformation out there that just know where you're spending your time because it can make you feel better about what you're doing or it can make you more confused and worse off.
Definitely.
And as moms or dads, as parents of little ones, you don't have extra time to waste. Like put your time towards what's actually going to benefit you and your little ones.
Definitely. Really like that. And that was definitely a plug on my end, not your end, because I really do love your Instagram. And I think it's resources that need to be out there. I mean, it's parents that are making the meals in their kitchen, but they're also not afraid to go to Costco and find some healthy snacks. So really appreciate you and your time coming on here. I'm going to put your Instagram and resources in the show notes. So for those that want to be like me and compare their snacks for what they're giving and get really good advice, you have a lot of good advice on there as well, where some people are all about just trying to attract clients, but you have a lot of really good free, actionable advice that anyone can put into play tomorrow. So thank you for putting that out into the world as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to.
Well, we will stay in touch. And I seriously just appreciate you taking the time to spread your knowledge with us.
Yeah, this is so great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.